Welcome to Deep Discussions Live and Learn podcast. I'm your host, poet, and life skills coach, Walter Williams. Thank you so much for your continued support of Deep Discussions' mission to inspire a better tomorrow. I hope that those of you who continue to follow and support Deep Discussions' mission, leave feeling better than you did before you listen. I hope I continue to uplift, inspire, and encourage you all to be the best version of yourselves. And with that being said, I'm going to share a story about how I became a better person as a result of some adverse circumstances. Facing adversity is probably the heart and soul of my life skills segment and subject. So I'm going to start off by first reading a poem that I wrote entitled Gone to Gain. Its grip is tight, bearing all its might. My body is off, I just can't get right. Moving in directions which I don't navigate, my shoulders throb, bearing all the weight. It's taking me places which I never envisioned, not in a good way. It left me missing. Constantly shaking, losing control of myself. Caught up in its allure, I refuse the help. Temptation has its ways, resistance is its foe. When asked if I'm okay, I bitterly tell them no. Unaware of my emotions, I leaned in even more. My heart and mind racing, body severely sore. Let me help you, says an unknown voice. With my body on pause, I'm left with no choice. What I once envisioned seemed to be no more. All that I visualized have now shut the door. What once seemed gold now appears to be dark. It's reached the end. There's nowhere for me to walk. I lost the key. For that, I'll take blame. At least I got from it all that there was to gain. So facing adversity is something that we all go through. And I've recently have been experiencing and facing some adversity in the workplace. I dealt with a manager that was really contentious, that was really hard to work with, and didn't really seem to have in place any value in what their employees and their direct reports had to say or had to offer in regards to the work that we do. And this got so contentious that it got to a point where I had to reach out to HR and get them involved. Never in my entire career have I done that. Never have I ever had to reach out to our human resources department because I was dealing with a contentious employee, let alone a manager. The role was ever changing. They were changing so many things that I was responsible for. I started off being primarily responsible for one thing. We did a restructure, so then they changed my assignment. I became responsible for other things, and they kept giving and taking things away and being really limited in their communication with me about what my assignments and my tasks were. And then we'll find different ways to kind of like take shots at me in an indirect way. It was almost kind of like subliminal. So it got to a point where one day I just said, all right, you know what? Let me reach out to her directly and tell her, look, there's some misunderstanding on my part on what my role should be. So here are some things that I think I can and should be responsible for, because I felt, as a leader or as someone that's aspiring to be a leader in an organization, you got to take initiative and at least say, look, this is my thought process, or this is what I think I should be doing. Kind of like initiate a conversation and initiate it with your own thoughts. However, sharing those thoughts, I was met with, really harsh feedback and contentious communication. I was put down a lot. I was pretty much in more ways than a lot. I was told that I was pretty much telling me that I'm not capable of the job. And, I'm not someone that they trust. I'm not someone that they believe in. And it got to a point where I was just, that's at that point, that was when I filed a claim with HR. HR said that they didn't really see anything that really deemed it to be retaliation or, hostile work environment. They didn't see any of that. So what they suggested was that I really focus in on the person that I report to, because the manager that I was having difficulties with is the manager of the person that I report to. Originally, she was my manager, but she then pretty much moved me down to report to someone else that I originally was in line with. So it was me, another person. I'm not going to say any names on here, but it was me, a person, and then me and that person reported to her. However, she decided, because she had so much on her plate with us adding a new team, it was best for her to move me down and have me now reporting to someone that I was pretty much collaborating with, and that was my peer. Now he becomes my manager. And a lot went into that. He had no interest in managing. She did a lot of the managing of me through him, put me on a performance review because of things that she felt I needed to improve upon. So now I need to earn her trust or prove to her what I'm capable of, but I need to do that through another party. So you push me down, you and basically demote me in a sense. I kept the same title and my pay didn't change. So I guess in a way you can say I was, blessed to have that situation or that circumstance in that regards. But I got pushed down, but was still being micromanaged because I'm supposed to be reporting to this guy now, but she's still managing me from afar and critiquing every little thing that I do. So once all of that pretty much, got to where it was, and once I realized that there's really no opportunity for me here to really seize control of my own development, I pushed harder to explore other opportunities. And during this time, a lot took place. I pretty much gave you a high level overview of what took place, but it was a lot more to it than that. I, you know, in my personal time, I was stressed out. I was, it got to a point where I was really like weeping and crying because I was so frustrated. You know, this was the job that I wanted for a long time. And I've been wanting to work for this company for, you know, a significant amount of years. So to finally got this opportunity to get the job that I've been wanting since I graduated college 13 years ago, and to finally work for this company that I had been trying to apply for prior to getting the job for about 3 or 4 years, I was just like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity. I need to make the most of it. But I wasn't given a chance to do so. So I talked to you today saying that I'm now prepared to transition to a new employer. Same job title. I'm working now for a competitor, but I have the same job title, but I will have more, I will have more of a leadership opportunity. I will be more involved and have more control over the program itself. So I'll be reporting to what we call in the corporate world a C-suite. Whereas where I was before, I reported to an individual who reported to another individual who then reported to a C-suite. So I, in turn, basically jumped 2 levels up. My pay increase, and I get to, and I got the opportunity to really fill out who I will be reporting to. So throughout this experience, there was a lot of things that I learned, and I'm going to share with you those things now. I have 5 points that I'm going to discuss with you on this story. The first thing that I learned about myself, how to deal with people. I often live with the mindset of meeting people where they are. That's one of the principles and one of the caveats of how I deal with people. I learn people, understand who they are, and pretty much build my relationship with that person by meeting them where they are and knowing that I don't have to live there. I can, take an occasional visit there when I'm meeting with them, take some kind of, opportunity to learn from that place and then carry it with me to my next, destination. But meeting people where they are does not mean you have to stay there. The next thing that I learned is our most adverse and stressful situations are usually the ones that contain the most fruitful information and the best opportunities to learn about life and ourselves. In this experience, I was going back and forth, waffling between, is this the job that I was called to do? Do I need to go back to where I was before, where I spent, what was it, from 12 to, yeah, where I spent about 9 years, in underwriting? Because underwriting, when I got out of college, my heart and soul or desires were set on getting to risk management. Once I got into underwriting, I was like, oh, I'm liking underwriting. Underwriting is really, really, it's something that was really interesting to me. It's something I enjoy doing. But it got to a point where I said, you know what? Underwriting is a staple or a key part of risk management. Underwriting prepares you for higher risk management roles. So underwriting, what it is you assess and evaluate risk on an account and portfolio standpoint. What risk management is you evaluate and manage risk from an enterprise standpoint. And that's what I wanted. So eventually that's where I got. But I was waffling back and forth. Should I go back to where I was? Because I'm not being appreciated and valued here. They're not giving me an opportunity to be great. So I applied for those opportunities. Some I got the call back on, but didn't want to move forward in the process. Some I just got rejected outright. And a lot of the times I think I got rejected for those because either I was overqualified or I didn't have enough experience from a manager standpoint to get that job. So I then said, all right, let me reevaluate and see if there's something for me to do within the company. I got put on, on a performance development review, whatever they want to. Basically, they call it not on track. So with me not being on track according to what they wanted to put out there, I said, well, my opportunity to grow isn't going to be here, because that means not only will I have to wait to the end of the year to look at and, consider, approaching or consider pursuing opportunities, I would have to go through this for another 3 or 4 months before I get word that I'm no longer on performance review to then be able to apply for a position. And that became too much because, one, I don't feel like I should have been on a review. Things weren't clearly communicated to me. So that's when I read between the lines, which is my next point. Our mind is a powerful tool that can get us out of trouble that we allow our hearts to get us into. We often want to give the benefit of the doubt to things that we feel our heart draws us to. My heart drew me to wanting to work for OneMain because, I had a relationship with them as a customer, and learning about the company, I loved what I learned about them. I loved, the relationships that I built as a customer, the things that I learned being a customer. I was like, okay. And what I truly loved was I guess it seemed like it was more of a niche market to me at that point in time, until I realized that the competitor I'm getting ready to go to is out there too. But to me, I was just like, oh, okay, this is a company that really, is kind of like in my atmosphere, really, right, or in my stratosphere. So I was really intrigued by the opportunity to work for them, but it just didn't work out for me. So my heart was really drawn to them, but my mind kept telling me, this ain't right for you. This is not the situation you want to be in. But my heart kept saying, no, you can work it out. It's just growing pains. It's an opportunity for you to get better as a person, for you to grow closer to understanding the company, to understanding the industry. But my mind, again, kept saying, look at what happened. You know, your heart oftentimes will tell you what things could be, but your mind will tell you what they are. And that's what kept happening to me. My heart will say, no, it may seem like this, but it really could mean that, or it's really preparing you for the possibility of, your heart draws a lot on possibilities, on what can happen and what may happen. Your mind is saying, this is what happened. You're gonna let that slide. And eventually my mind took over. My mind eventually got the best of me and said, it's time for a change. And originally that's what I was going to call this podcast. Something needs to change, or it's time for a change. But I decided to be a little bit more, I guess, be a little bit more technical with naming it when enough becomes too much. But leadership versus management. This was something else that I learned. Leadership versus management. Leadership is a representation of someone that inspires and has the best interest of those that follow them. We hear the saying lead by example, but we never hear manage by example. At least I don't. If you hear manage by example, more power to you. I don't think it makes sense. But why do you think that is? Why do you think we hear lead by example instead of manage by example? Because lead by example is leadership is a skill, but it's also based off of qualities and traits. Whereas management is something that is pretty much predominantly skills based. And it's based off of, what we see in job descriptions. When you apply for positions, you see regional manager, district manager, assistant manager, branch manager. You don't see district leader, regional leader. You don't really see that, because manager is almost like it's a script. It's like it's a template of what, overall most companies should deem or regard a manager to be. Whereas leadership, you can't really write a description of that. You can't create a job description off of a leader. A leader has to be instinctual. It has to be natural what a leader is. It can't be written on paper what a leader should be. So that was something else that I learned. As an aspiring leader, I had to, learn these things. And we have to sometimes learn these things through the storm. Sometimes we have to be on the opposite end of of the equation that we may be on eventually. I may someday become a leader, and I do not want who I lead or who I'm responsible for to feel anything like what I felt in this situation. And sometimes we got to go through what we don't want to figure out what we do want. I just shared a post about that not that long ago, because in order to know what we do want, we have to take heed and have appreciation for what it is that we want, and understand its true utmost value. The last thing that I'm going to close out this segment with is, we find ourselves going through the same vicious cycles over and over and over again because we subconsciously refuse God's help. There was one day that I was on my way to work, and I just got so overwhelmed and just so to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. I was just something has to change. Something has to give. Because I kept asking throughout this whole situation, what is there for me to learn? You all know that one of the values and one of the things and the principles that I like to teach is learn something in each and every situation or experience that you have. Take something away from it, whether it's something about those types of situations, those type of circumstances, about who you are, the type of people you deal or you're dealing or dealt with. Take some kind of nugget or some kind of note from every experience. And I kept trying to find that, but what I thought was the note that I was supposed to take kept being deemed rejected or not what I was supposed to learn. And that's what happens when our most adverse and stressful situations contain the most fruitful information, because it's telling us, no, that's not what I'm trying to teach you. You can learn that in a much lesser situation, not this one. You've been through too much in this situation to only learn something that simple that you could have learned yesterday by just going to the mall or going to the store, because nobody goes to malls anymore. But on this day, I literally cried and poured my heart out to God and about my situation and surrendered to him and his will. And I said, God, I don't know what you're trying to teach me here, but I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to hear. I'm ready to stop trying to figure out the lesson and just hear you tell me what the lesson is. And as experiences and situations started to kind of like, take place in this situation, whether it be, I be I'm given tasks after being told to not be a task taker. I'm being handed things after being told to take ownership. I'm not getting responses back on strategies and initiatives that I created after being told to take ownership. I sent these things to them to say, hey, take a look at this and give me your thoughts, only to get nothing back. So I said, okay, I know what's going on here. I'm being pushed out, point blank. I'm not being, my contributions are not valuable enough. So it's time for me to take my talents elsewhere. And lo and behold, a week later, I got a phone call from my soon to be new employer, Regional Finance, who I'm now essentially going to do the same exact job, but at a higher level. More responsibility, more leadership, more ownership, and greater expectations. The problem that I had with One Main, where I worked, is they had these great expectations, but very limited opportunity to meet those expectations. Whereas with my new job, I actually got to get to know the manager, because this experience taught me to carefully evaluate who you're working for or who you're working with. Because, and I think it was my wife that said it, that they're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them as well. So I got a feel for how she is. She's a very intense individual, the lady that I'm reporting to, but she values her employees. She wants them to be great. She made it a point to mention that to me multiple times in our interactions. And what I what I love what I love about her after learning about her is her commitment to incorporating the thoughts, beliefs, and ideas of others. She specifically said this to me, and don't quote me exactly for what she said, but she said specifically, I'm not, I don't know everything. There may be some things that I get wrong, or some things that I do that you may say, oh, it can be done better, or it can be done this way. And I'm all open to that. That's not the environment that I was in before. I was in an environment where the manager wanted to be the smartest person in the room and didn't want to hear nobody else's ideas, or quickly shot down other people's ideas. But when she became overwhelmed and frustrated, wanted to push it back on everybody else and say, what do you think? What are your thoughts? I don't know. I don't get it. Well, you've been marching to the beat of your own drum. We just been following behind you like a cheerleader. So I digress. I could go on for hours about that whole situation, but those are the main things that I learned from that. We're now going to segue over to spiritual relief, where I share a Bible verse or verses that I feel is really connected to today's discussion, and I give my thoughts on what those verses stated. Today's Bible verse comes from James chapter 4, verses 6-8, and it reads, and he gives grace generously. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come close to God, and God will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. In the face of adversity, God is testing your commitment and faith in him. Though you may go down a path that serves you no good, God is forgiving and always grant you readmission. Though you may think the ways of God do not appeal to you, he as the creator of life knows how to humble you and bring you back to earth. And lastly, what we think is God's voice may not always be such. It is the conviction and courage of you as his faithful servant that dictates what you know, not think or feel, but what you know God is saying. And that last point right there was the one there for me. Because again, I kept thinking over and go over again. All right, God is telling me to be this person. God is telling me to do this. God is telling me to take more of this, only for it to keep being rejected and keep being pushed away. And I think that there's another value too to look out for those that are around you that I learned in this. And that's probably another story that I can share for another day. So so be on the lookout for another story that I'm going to share about that on looking out for others in the face of adversity. But that right there was the one that really kind of like struck home to me because sometimes we use certain things and certain behaviors and means of coping. We lean on them as a crutch. And what I leaned on as a crutch throughout all of my circumstances is trying to find the lesson. But what you think is what I thought was the lesson was not the lesson initially. And God is saying to me, look, one, you can learn something much more from this experience than what you think. And every experience, just because you may feel or think that's the lesson doesn't necessarily mean that's the lesson all the time. So now I'm gonna transition over to my last segment entitled "In My Opinion," and it's the top 5 things that we discover in our most adverse times. We discover our strengths and weaknesses. We discover what we are not called to do. We discover who does not belong in our social or professional circle. We discover that there is more to life than what we have experienced. And lastly, we discover that we need God and always will. All of those, probably except the second one, really tailors to my situation. The one that does not is what we are not called to do, because I'm moving on to a position that is essentially the same exact title, but it's more traditional. What I did for One Main was a non-traditional risk manager role. Where I'm going at now is more traditional. So I was called to be a risk manager, just not called to be a risk manager that One Main was looking for. So I discovered my strengths and weaknesses for sure. I discovered who does not belong in my professional circle. I added some more people to my social circle, people that I will connect with both, well, now outside of work that I will still continue to connect with, and some on a professional level as well. And I also discovered that there's more to life than what we have experienced. I thought that my most adverse and stressful experience in my whole entire life would be with someone that I dated almost a decade ago. This probably takes the cake for me. And the reason why is because I've always valued who and what I was professionally before who I was, relationally, if that's even a word. But now being married, I had to really rediscover that, because who I am as a husband is far more important than who I am as a professional. Don't get me wrong, who I am as a professional is important. But back in the day with that situation that I dealt with an ex, that really is what prompted me to start deep discussion. That does not bear in comparison to what I just experienced, because that I learned a lot from, don't get me wrong, but this also impacted how I feel about prioritizing my mental and emotional health and my career. I could have kept saying, look, I'm making a decent amount of money. I finally got the position that I've been wanting, and I finally worked for a company that I've been aspiring to work for. But I would have ignored and neglected my mental and emotional health, which would have impacted my family, and more importantly, it would have impacted me. So those are the things that I learned about more, that there's more to life than what we've experienced. And lastly, I just pretty much touched on this pretty much throughout the whole entire conversation. We will always need God, no matter what experience you've overcome, and no matter what experience He just got you through. You're going to need Him again. Adversity is going to come. Challenges are going to come your way. How reliable are you, or how reliant are you going to be on God? Because you're going to need Him. So there's no need of sugarcoating it or even trying to be objective to that. Thank you again, as always, for supporting Deep Discussions' mission to provide inspiration for a better tomorrow. Again, this is probably one of the 3 or 4 best gifts and hats that I wear outside of being a father and being a husband. Being a poet and a life skills coach that God called me to be is something that I really, really hold close to my heart. And I hope that you all find value in the messages that I shared through Deep Discussion. You can follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on TikTok, where I share my poetry. I'm also on YouTube. And you can visit my website at deepdiscussion.org. If you're a business owner, let's get connected. There are a ton of things that I'm working with to help build, to help celebrate, promote, and recognize business owners and their businesses. It's a passion of mine. I love celebrating business owners and people that work hard to bring a brand or a product or a service or an idea to life. So that's what this is all about. So I hope to connect with you. And if you just have an idea or a message that you want to share, let's get connected. Let's chat. Let's have a discussion so you can come and be a guest or be featured in my newsletter. If you want to subscribe, visit my website, www.deepdiscussion.org, or you can email me at beinspired@deepdiscussion.org. You can always contact me via phone, 443-916-5009. If you have any topic, any idea or discussion that you want to have, let's get connected. And business owners, I'm looking for you. Let's get connected. Let's get you recognized and get people to know how great you are at what you do. Thanks again for supporting Deep Discussion, inspiration for a better tomorrow.